friends. It's great to be with you again as we start these podcasts in the Lenten season. And today, as we begin talking about the first topic of justice, which I think many of you would know and could relate of how prevalent that is in today's world, with things as we're hearing things and things going on in the sense. And but in this in our books here, and as a reminder. We're using the Broken Signposts by N.T. Wright, and we're talking about these signposts, and again with today's being on justice, and we start thinking about this. One of the things that stuck out to me in this, well, many things actually in this chapter, but when he's talking about crime novels and things of a friend of his, and how him and his wife got together, and they were talking about these things, and he didn't think they'd have anything in common, and they ended up having this thing common. But his main thing was that he said the thing about crime novels was, and this isn't rocket science, but it helps me understand what's going on, that justice is done in the end. And when you think about that, and you think about books, and you think about stories, yes, usually something good happens, in most senses. And I think his point is here, yes, there is a piece of justice that is broken, which we call injustice, that's happening. But in the end, and as you're going through, if you're reading along with us, in the end, you see that justice is brought back through Jesus's time on the cross and through his resurrection and things like that.
Or at least that this idea of justice is for us the ultimate hope.
Correct. Yes.
I think that Wright's point is that everywhere we look, we can see evidences of injustice. Mm-hmm. And somehow or other, we believe that the gospel of Jesus Christ is the way that we understand what justice is. Because I think that the first question that we have to ask as we wrestle with this signpost is, what do we think justice is? What does it mean? Wright declares justice is a manifestation of God's love. And when we begin to understand justice and God's love being connected, I think that becomes an important way for us to wrestle with bringing justice into the world.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of the things, like he talks about too. As he says, and I think we see this, he talks about many different things, but how, and this kind of relates, and it can relate to you, but one of the examples he says, like people playing on playgrounds, and he says, many adults still tell you the name of the class bully or the mean-spirited teacher who made their lives miserable when they were 10 years or younger. And he says many families include siblings or cousins who are not speaking because of something that happened years ago. I mean, everything in that thing's related to me in some form or fashion, because I have, an aunt and my mom who don't currently not speaking. I went through bullying through mostly freshman year of high school. So this kind of things, like, and he's right, I can name the person who did it. It's just those kind of things that ingrain in you and you don't think about it. And it says, the point was that he says justice runs deep. And so when justice affects you, it really affects you and can stay with you, as you go out, because it's just something you don't forget. And I think as we think about this today, just because someone in our lives or you yourself may not have experienced injustices, doesn't mean that we shouldn't look to see, what does it really mean when someone is facing it, and how are they experiencing it? Like, I may not be experiencing it personally like someone else is, but in our minds, we should be trying to understand, well, what is it that this person's feeling, that they're feeling that justice isn't occurring.
Yeah, I think that's a critical point. Wright says that God is on the side of the victim.
Yeah.
And I think, I personally would define justice as protecting the weak from the tyranny of the strong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why it becomes so crucial at this moment in history,
Yeah. Yeah.
because there is this pervasive sense of the weak being harmed
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in every possible way. And I think that it is incumbent on those of us who are somewhat empowered,
Yeah.
through wealth and standing. And the psalmist says, the property lines have fallen pleasantly for me. That we need to understand where we are in this moment. Wright focuses primarily on the story of the woman caught in adultery.
Yep.
As being the moment of injustice and justice. And I think that, one of the critical things to me is that we tend to hear that phrasing in that story of, you who is without sin, cast the first stone, in terms of some, well, everybody fails kind of sense, which is true.
Mm-hmm.
And we neglect the fact that casting the first stone in biblical justice was necessarily the responsibility of the harmed party. And largely no one in the crowd was willing to say, what this woman has done harmed me.
Right.
I have an attachment to her.
Yeah.
And so her behavior harms me.
Mm-hmm.
I think that mostly injustice comes about when we pull apart society. When we begin to act as if some portion of humanity is not real. They're not human.
Yeah.
They're not like us. And so therefore I can do anything I want. Well, that's the problem.
Yeah.
They are like us, whoever they are.
Yeah. And it is. I mean, that's the truth. Even in part of these in the scriptures, as we said, that where N.T. Wright uses the Gospel of John in his stories, and he talks about, he says, but now we should see where this is going. John has transposed the question of justice and ultimate justice into a different sphere. The term the devil, or Satan, however you say it in Hebrew, means the accuser. And the irony of these middle chapters in John is that the crowds who are trying to accuse Jesus include accusing him of being demon possessed, are themselves doing the work of accusation. And and that's kind of what he's kind of bringing to their attention, as in this sense, is like he says like the larger question of justice, the longing of all humans that things should be put right in the end, but how? And I think that's what we're still dealing with today. Is we realize things are happening, but we struggle to find a way to fix it.
Right.
In
Absolutely.
this sense, and he talks about in this sentence, like I loved the one point that he made in one of the parts that he said. Like, even though this is going on, he says God will not allow injustice to be the last word, and that just is a really powerful statement to realize that God is still in control, and that we know at some point of time these injustices are not going to continue, but while they are continuing, it's trying to find a way to
break the cycle.
Yes, break the cycle. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Earlier on in the chapter, he says the history of the 20th century in Europe in particular is the story of how perceived injustices gnawed away at this or that nation or people until finally something needed to be done. Tragically, the something that was then done produced more grievances, more cascading effects.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the grand problem at this moment in history.
Yeah.
Whatever injustice gets pointed to, another group of people says, well, yeah, but what about X? And then somebody else says, well, yes, but what about Y? And what about Z? And we go grievance to grievance to grievance, and we're never going to get to the bottom. We're never going to be able to create justice in that way. It takes this, as Wright terms it, and using the biblical metaphor of new creation. That's the point to the cross, is that it is the launching of a whole new reality. Wright says John's gospel is all about creation and new creation. It is deliberately and carefully telling the story of the Creator God making a good world, grieving at its collapse into wickedness and, yes, injustice, and determining to put it right. John is indeed writing about the new creation, putting the old creation right, launching the new one from the middle of the old. Wright is calling us to understand that when Jesus takes on himself the sin of the world, he's, the cross is the ultimate injustice, right?
Yep.
Here is the Almighty, the perfect, the truly sinless one, who has no reason to be suffering, saying, fine, do your worst to me. I will take it into me, and we'll start this whole thing over again.
Yeah.
And we break that cycle because of that self-giving love.
What he did, yes. There's a part that he says that Jesus comes to defeat the anti-creation powers that have ruled the world, and he says the sign that he has done comes when he inaugurates the new creation, as we've been talking about, and this is what Jesus is trying to do. That this Gospel of John, it even though it's like it stands in the noble Jewish tradition, but it refuses to allow the evil and the injustices to have the last word. And that's the point of what we're trying to say. And that's the point of these things. Yes, we're living in a time where these signposts are broken, but in this point is there is a way that this signpost can be fixed. And there's a way that this justice can occur. And, he says that the story, he says in the one section, he called it justice bringers. He says, Jesus is quite clear. One of the beautiful things that distinguishes the Christian idea of justice from others is that it is participatory. We are part of bringing it about. Once Jesus has done what he has to do, he will send the Spirit upon his followers so that through our witness, a new sort of justice will be born. And that's we are. I mean, the followers are just not the disciples that were with him at the time. The followers are us today as well, to continue to make sure that justice is happening. Like he says, the agenda Jesus has for his followers is to prove the world in the wrong, and he says, how will we do this? By doing what Jesus did.
Exactly. And I think that's the struggle for us is, Paul's phrasing in Philippians is having the mind that was in Christ Jesus, who though in the form of God did not count equality with God something to be grasped or exploited or held on to, but emptied himself, taking the form of a servant. And that's ultimately how this justice will be brought into the world, how we will live into this grand longing, is by ourselves participating in that act of giving ourselves away. Because it is the victim that is the place where God resides.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. One of the parts that he talks about at the end, and as I'm looking, I'm seeing you have the same thing highlighted. I have it underlined in the book as but he says the whole point of the story is that the crucifixion of Jesus, we see the world, we know the world where we all want justice, but where it doesn't happen. The world where injustice wins, where the bullies and the power brokers do what they want and get away with it. The world where we live in, the world into which the incarnate word came to announce and to embody a different sort of justice, a justice as restorative, for reasons that will become apparent. A justice in which the real source of wickedness, the dark force that stands behind the betrayal of Judas, the plotting of the chief priest, the cynicism of the Roman governor is first identified and allowed to do its worst, and then is overcome and robbed of its power. I mean, just a very, really powerful words, but saying, yes, this is going to happen, but that's not the end of it's not the end. As it said earlier, like, God doesn't let injustice have the last word. And so it's part of the thing. And this all leads into this next part of, so where did it occur and where did it sin? And here, as we say, justice, as we talk about, is about creation being restored, about things being put back right. And through Jesus's resurrection, that's how this all, things became restored, and did that. The new creation is accomplished through Jesus's own presence, as N.T. Wright said, supremely through his death when he's lifted up. And that's part of what he talks about, is when he's lifted up, then everyone kind of looks towards him in that aspect.
I think that's a good place for us to end for this week. We look forward to this Sunday and the Reverend Dr. Joey Shelton coming to share with us around justice, and how we live into being justice bearers into the world, justice bringers, yeah. I think is Wright's term. And we will look forward to talking with you next week. We'll actually go a little bit out of order from the book. Next week, we will be talking about spirituality, and then the following week, love. Just fell that way. And so that's what we will be doing. We hope that you will join us and look forward to sharing with you again.
Yes, have a great day, folks.